Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our ongoing virtual learning series, The State of Pregnant and Parenting Students in California. I am Evelyn Lucho, pronoun she, they, and I serve as a Student Basic Needs Senior Program Coordinator at the Michelson 20mm Foundation. I'm a Latina woman with dark brown hair, and I am wearing a brown top. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that today's event is being organized on the traditional lands of the Tongva people, and we would like to pay our respects to elders, both past and present. We would like to honor all the ancestor stewards of this land in which we meet today, and their descendants living in over 1,000 tribes, nations, bands, pueblos, communities, or native villages. Before we highlight the lessons learned from the Sense of Belonging survey conducted by EdTrust-West, I'd like to first share a bit about the foundation. Founded by Dr. Gary K. Michelson and Alia Michelson, the Michelson 20mm Foundation is dedicated to ensuring that everyone, particularly our most vulnerable populations, has access to equitable post-secondary education opportunities that lead to meaningful careers. We proudly operate at the cutting edge of higher education to help forward-thinking innovators, nonprofits, and startups close the opportunity gap. We do not do all of this alone. Michelson 20mm is blessed with amazing partners whom we'd like to thank for making today's webinar possible. Ascend at the Aspen Institute, Blue Shield of California Foundation, the California Communication Foundation, California Competes, Tipping Point Community, and EdTrust-West, who you will be hearing from today. The Sense of Belonging survey was developed to further understand the experiences of parenting students and their sense of belonging at their institutions. Through these findings, we hope to understand where to direct efforts towards further resources, supports, and policy initiatives that will help further amplify student-parent success. It is our hope that you find today's conversation engaging, inspiring, and helpful in your work. We encourage you to join the discussion using our chat. Share your thoughts and stories on social media with the hashtag #StudentParents and tag us at Michelson20mm. During the event, please feel free to pose your questions using the Q&A Zoom feature. Please note, our presenters will do their best to address them in the dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We will also drop a link to a post-event evaluation in the chat, so you will have it readily available at the conclusion of the event. Your feedback is valuable to us as we plan future programming for the virtual learning series. With that said, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Isaac Alferos, a research and data analyst at EdTrust-West. Isaac's work focuses on expanding college access and success for Black students and students of color. They use their experience as a researcher, organizer, and a child of parenting students to inform their commitment to expanding college access and support for parenting students across the state. With us, we have Maya Valerie, a senior policy analyst at EdTrust-West. Maya leads initiatives to support the academic success and well-being of over 400,000 student parents in California and co-leads the California Alliance for Student Parent Success. Prior to joining the EdTrust-West team, she served as a graduate student coordinator for Cal Poly Students with Dependence Programs and a research assistant to Dr. Tina Chuk's #StudentParentJoy campaign. Joining us as well is Jordan Cayley, an undergraduate at San Francisco State University completing her final year in communication studies and serving as the Director of Facilities and Operations on the Board of Directors for Associated Students that represents over 21,000 students. Jordan is an advisory committee member of the California Alliance for Student Parent Success Advisory Committee and the president and co-founder of the Student Parent Union, advocating for parenting students on campus. Before transferring to San Francisco State, Jordan and her daughter benefited from the Family Resource Center programs and childcare at City College of San Francisco, which supported her return to college. This experience drives her dedication to uplift other parenting students through advocacy and community building. Lastly, we'll be joined by Melissa Valenzuela Stuckey, the Director of P16 Research at EdTrust-West. Melissa oversees the development and implementation of equity-focused research agenda that spans the entire educational continuum, from transitioning kindergarten to post-secondary completion. A proud graduate of Miami-Dade County Public School System, she brings extensive experience in research, policy design, and evaluation. Melissa has worked with the New York City Department of Education in Advanced Illinois. Her efforts have a particular focus on equitable school finance reform and improving transitions between early learning systems, K through 12 public schools, and higher education institutions. Please join us in welcoming our esteemed presenters.
So much, Eve. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Isaac will kick us off with our presentation. We're thrilled to join you all today and to share some really exciting qualitative research that we've been doing around parenting students' experience and sense of belonging at the CSU.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to share some of the insights that we have as a result of our most recent study. This study is part of our continual work at EdTrust-West into better understanding, uplifting, and bettering the experiences of parenting students across the state of California. Like we said, I want to do a quick introduction of our team. I am joined by my wonderful two colleagues at Trust West, Maya Vowry and Melissa Valenzuela-Stuckey, as well as the incredible Jordan Kelly, to help share her experience as a student parent as well. So for over 2 decades, EdTrust-West has been using research to help push educational equity initiatives across the state of California. Through that experience, we've developed a really specific approach to research that ensures that we are telling rich stories, sharing impactful data, and setting up our advocates with the tools they need to change the laws, policies, and practices for the better. A key part of that approach is the narrative. We believe that in order to make impactful work of data, to make numbers transform lives, we must uncover and uplift critical narratives. Our parenting student work is no different either. The first part of this is digging. A substantive part of our data work is using large data sets, oftentimes state data sets, interviews, and focus groups to unearth the truth. Specifically, we're looking to highlight the experiences of experts. And by experts, we mean those who experience inequities directly. We're using this and we aim to bring light to their experiences. We do this work with a specific laser focus as well. We're unapologetic in our commitment to advancing racial equity in education and centering the experiences of students of color and multilingual learners. The second part of this is what we call weaving. For us, that means that we are taking the experiences that are highlighted in the data that we find through our focus groups and interviews and connecting it with existing research, policies, and practices to help better answer questions about what problems of practice need to be solved. This also means that we work in partnership with policymakers, state agencies, K-12, and higher education institutions, and advocates to provide the evidence needed to inform necessary improvements. Again, we're doing this with a critical focus on Black students, students of color, multilingual learners, and students experiencing poverty as well. With that said, I'll go through a quick agenda. We have 3 parts for you today for our webinar. First, you'll hear from me on some background for what a sense of belonging study is, defining it, understanding its use, and highlighting its need. Then I will transition over to our wonderful Director of P16 Research, Melissa, to go over our most recent study and some of the initial findings that resulted from that study. And lastly, I'll hand us over to our wonderful parenting student policy analyst, Maya, and our incredible parenting student, Jordan, to take us through how we'll make sense of this data, answer questions that come up as a result of this data, and to give recommendations of how we turn this data into actionable next steps for both CSU leaders and state stakeholders. So part of our work and working to better understand parenting students is identifying several opportunities to strengthen data collection, including leveraging qualitative data on students' experiences and on sense of belongings. So for us, we know that foundation to this work is understanding what it means when we say sense of belonging and why it's important for us to investigate that. So we found many different definitions for sense of belonging. And though we're not really in a position to say that one is better than the other, what we did find is that across these varying definitions, there were two elements that we knew needed to be part of our approach to understanding the sense of belonging of our parenting students. First, we wanted to investigate the extent to which parenting students felt connected to their campus community. This is really important. It's about understanding the ways in which students identify with their campus. We also wanted to make sure that this connectedness was measuring the way in which parenting students felt they were an integral part of that community. For our definition, we want to measure more than just identifying with a campus. We wanted to see if parenting students felt they were a vital part of their campus's identity as well. And the research shows us that there are a couple prominent benefits of understanding and bettering the sense of belonging of students. First, we see benefits on students' academic performance and mental health. Right? So this includes increased persistence, better use of campus services, better academic achievement for students, and in long term, better outcomes for our students as well. In particular, we highlight findings from three different studies here that measure impacts of sense of belonging at four-year institutions across the country and among first generation students as well. The second impact that we saw, or a focal point for us, is the specific impact this has on students of color. Right? Given that racial equity is the cornerstone of the work we do at EdTrust-West, it shouldn't be surprising that this was a pretty big incentive for us to study, especially when we consider the majority of our parenting students are students of color. These studies highlighted that, unfortunately, students of color at four-year institutions were less likely to feel that they belonged on their campus. That is a concerning result. Also, even here in California, our current California Healthy Kids survey that's done through K-12 institutions found that Black students are more than twice as likely to report low connectedness to their school as their white peers. When we consider that Black parents make up a disproportionate share of our parenting student population, this makes this an even more critical revelation that informed our need to better understand the experiences and sense of belonging of our parenting students. Now, it's important to note that beyond our work, the CSU is no stranger to sense of belonging studies and the importance of this work on understanding their students' sense of belonging. Here you can see some examples of the ways in which both the CSU Chancellor's Office and various campuses are already interested in students' sense of belonging and already doing the work to better understand it. Some campuses we've seen have added language assessing sense of belonging to their campus climate surveys. Some have launched all new targeted initiatives to better understand sense of belonging for specific student populations as well. And this is really exciting to see. We see our work as riding this wave and contributing information on the sense of belonging of parenting students specifically to the larger body of work the CSU is already developing. Now, similar to the CSU, we at EdTrust-West are no stranger to the needs and experiences of parenting students across the state. Here you can see examples of the work we put out over the years in collaboration with parenting students and faculty leaders to advance parenting students' success, not just in the CSU, but across the state of California. We published reports that highlight stories of parenting students, structural inequities and policy gaps, and solutions to address systemic inequities impacting our parenting students. Included in this work is our current partnership with Cal Competes in building the California Alliance for Student Parent Success. This alliance has already done a lot and has become a very fruitful repository of data and information and resources that serve as insights on parenting students across California. In specific, I want to highlight a recent publication by the Alliance as it shares some really important critical statistics on the undergraduate parenting student population in California. This report highlights that 61% of student parents are the first in their family to go to college. This is important because if we support them through degree attainment, it's likely that their children will also go to college. Though our partnership with, or excuse me, through our partnership with Reedley and Long Beach City College, we are already beginning to do some of the work to help better support parenting students across the state. Notably, parenting students are also more likely than non-parents to experience poverty, to be students of color, women, and first-generation students. On average, parenting students also earn higher grades than non-parenting students, but stop out of school at higher rates. This demonstrates for us that parenting students have the resilience to continue through education, but are needing the supports to meet them. And lastly, before I turn you over to Melissa, I want to highlight the framework we're using to better understand the data that exists around parenting students. This framework was developed and pulled from our previous publication on the present data collection efforts of the CSU on parenting student data, and it highlights the three different types of data we consider and we believe is necessary to collect to have the information needed to support our parenting students. In addition to demographic and outcome data, these are typically data points we're more used to collecting. We see our sense of belonging work falling into this last bucket of student needs data, and it highlights non academic metrics that better understand the needs and challenges of parenting students. With that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Melissa to discuss the findings from our most recent survey.
Thank you so much, Isaac. You set the stage beautifully. So I'm thrilled to get the opportunity to kind of dig into some data with you folks today. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of information, a lot of numbers. We are also really trying to prioritize making sure that we are sharing a lot of rich qualitative data today. But I do encourage folks to make sure that you are engaging. So feel free to stick stuff in the chat to react with questions or comments. And as Eve mentioned at the top of the hour, if you have any questions, you can also submit those through the QA function. So Isaac provided us a bit of grounding in why it's important to understand students' experiences on campus, and why in particular we were interested in digging into understanding whether student parents across the CSU feel like they belong on their campuses, and what might need to be done at individual campuses, at the system level, at the state level, to make sure we're really fostering a strong sense of belonging for those students, given the research that Isaac highlighted that shows that when students feel like they belong, like they're included, like they, fit in on campus, they see better academic outcomes. They're more likely to complete their degree, and they see better mental health kind of outcomes as well. So what we wanted to do to kind of fill the gap in knowledge that currently exists about these students' experience is to administer a survey to as many students as we could reach over the course of the fall across as many CSU campuses as we could touch. We partnered with a firm called AB Partners, who does audience testing and survey research and polling that's really focused on understanding the needs and experiences of people of color in particular. So a lot of these findings are kind of evidence that AB helped us uncover. The themes that pop up over the course of our survey are listed out here. So we really wanted to dig deep into, as we said, that notion of belonging, the notion of belonging uncertainty, because if that is a condition that folks feel, sometimes they feel like they belong and sometimes they feel differently, we want to really make sure that we're strengthening that so there's a consistent feeling of belonging on campus. We also just wanted to hear things in students' own voice. We didn't want to reduce things down just to kind of hard numbers, but to really hear in their own words what student parents are experiencing. And we also wanted to make sure that this data was as actionable as possible. So we asked students to give us their recommendations for solutions or actions that their campuses could take to really strengthen their sense of belonging. That's my favorite part, and I'm most excited to share some of the solutions that they came up with for us. So in terms of fielding, just so you all are aware of who the survey went out to and who participated, we fielded the survey in two waves. We know that student parents are very busy and have a lot going on in the fall semester, so we wanted to give them two bites at this apple. We sent out the survey link to kind of folks who work with student parents and on basic needs across campuses within the CSU system. Both in August and September, where we received responses from 49 participants, and in a second wave, once folks were settled into classes and their routine later in the fall in October. We got 151 participants during that round for a grand total of 200 survey participants. It's really important to note that this was not a representative sample. We really are trying to essentially kind of pilot this idea of doing a rich, deep qualitative study on student parents' experiences on campuses in the hopes that in the future, this can lay the groundwork for something bigger, something more at scale that captures, the vast majority, if not all, of parenting students across a system like the CSU. So this is kind of a small bite at the apple, but hopefully illuminates what can be possible with this type of research. So in our sample, so you can get a little bit of an idea of the kind of geography and spread of where students were coming from. We have a list of campuses as well as the number of respondents that we heard from at each campus. I'm not going to read through each of those, but feel free to give a shout out if your campus is represented. And then in terms of demographics, so you can get a picture of our sample, we had 176 respondents who identify as women and 22 respondents who identify as men. The race ethnicity of folks who responded to our sample was pretty diverse. We had 126 Latino respondents, 35 white respondents, 15 Black respondents, and 24 who identified as belonging to other races. We also had a pretty even split between folks who had just one child and folks who had more than one child. But we felt that was an important dimension to capture as well. All right. So getting right into some of the findings, one of the things we wanted to make sure we did as we kind of started to gather this information was really start with assets. It's so frequent that when we talk about parenting students in particular, students who, institutions are really working to improve how they serve in terms of getting them to and through, we often start with a really deficit frame, and EdTrust-West wants to break from that mold. So the first question that we asked folks was, how does being a parent make them a stronger student? And the responses that we heard were incredibly rich. We heard folks speak to stronger time management skills, a stronger sense of self-determination, a feeling that they wanted to be a role model for their kids, and the notion that those kind of themes improved their outcomes as a student and made them feel a lot more motivated to kind of continue in school. So a couple quotes we have here on the right-hand side: being a parent makes me a stronger student because it has taught me resilience, time management, and determination. Balancing my responsibilities as a parent with my academic commitments requires careful planning and prioritization, which helps me stay focused and efficient in my studies. So really interesting, very clear articulation of the kind of skills and competencies that help someone thrive in a college environment being gained and built upon because they are a parent. And then the second quote that we have here from a Fullerton student, she's the reason I haven't given up. I'm her example in never giving up. I have a goal and I'm determined to achieve it to make a better life for us. So really hits home the power of, having a child and being a role model for that child as a driver of success, not something that undermines it or is a barrier. All right, so with that grounding, we can get into some of the findings from the rest of the survey. And so the first question we asked folks after that kind of asset-based opening is around whether or not they feel a sense of belonging on campus. And when we ask that question very generally about whether students feel included and supported on their campus, we actually found that a majority of student parents who responded to the survey did feel included and supported on campus. Give you a little bit more specificity on the numbers there. 67% of respondents agreed that they feel included by people on campus, and 86% agreed that in general, people at their campus want them to succeed. And so when you were a respondent actually filling out the survey, it auto-populated with your specific campus name in these questions. There's always a little bit more to dig into with these types of responses. So for example, with this 67% agreeing they feel included does make me think, what's going on with the other third? There's probably work to be done in ensuring that they feel included as well. But so despite this fact that kind of a majority of respondents felt included on their campuses when we asked the question in that general way, when we activate the parent-student identity in particular, so when we prime people to think specifically about their place as a student parent, a slightly different picture emerges about how much they feel as though they belong on their campuses. When we activate that identity, over half report belonging uncertainty, and nearly half report that they do not fit in when thinking about being a student parent on campus. So this starts to raise a little bit of a red flag, and suggests that there is work to be done to understand why students are, when they're thinking about their status as a parent, why they're more likely to say that they don't feel like they fit in, and what can be done about it. All right, so we also wanted to know how student parents find information that is relevant to them, whether or not they are aware of resources and policies that could make their lives easier as parenting students, could provide them the supports they need to thrive, and could strengthen that sense of belonging. So what we heard from them is that student parent respondents want more access to information about the resources available to them. And so again, a lot of our findings we're going to try to frame in a productive, forward-looking way, a solutions-focused way. And so this is what they're saying they want. They want more information, more easily accessible. Less than half of the parenting students who responded to our survey say that they can find out about supports for student parents with ease. So they know where to go and they can find clear and easily accessible information. So there's obviously some work to be done there in ensuring that that number goes up. When we think about resource availability, we wanted to understand, campuses have a wide range of different resources that students can take advantage of. And we wanted to understand whether students were aware of what resources are available on their campus. What we found is that most parenting student respondents were unaware of the specific resources that are available to them. This is, through no fault of their own. It's likely a combination of the fact that, again, there are very different arrays of resources on campuses, and there's some kind of disconnect happening in the communication of what those resources are. So things like priority access and guaranteed parking permits, financial assistance with off-campus childcare, parenting classes, we asked the whole gamut. And as you can see from these results, it looks like there's an overwhelming majority of folks who don't know if these services and resources exist on their campus. One of the things that EdTrust-West is intending to do over the next couple of years is try to answer that question ourselves by working directly with campuses to try to kind of tabulate, what is there on each campus and where are the gaps so that they can kind of help to communicate these things more clearly with students. So as a result of that lack of awareness about what resources exist on their campus that they have access to, it stands to reason that we would also see a kind of low utilization of resources even when they are there. The exception is financial aid support. So over half of our respondents said that they were kind of accessing and receiving financial aid support. But we saw much lower rates of folks saying that they were able to access and take advantage of things like family-friendly events, advising specific to parenting students, family-friendly spaces, designated student parent centers or staff, on-campus childcare, diaper changing stations. And so to us, this feels like a really fruitful opportunity to kind of go through a list of services like this and make sure that they're there, people know they're there, and that they're accessible on every single campus. And one of the things that I'll say that we're not going to get to dive today into campus-specific results, but we do have some campus-specific results for those which ended up having a lot of respondents in our sample. So if you're curious about digging a little bit deeper, we are going to make sure to make some of that information available to folks, and you can follow up with specific questions as well. But everything that we're sharing here is kind of across all of the campuses that were represented in our survey. All right, one actual bright spot that I want to highlight. So here again, we see that aside from priority registration, few respondents in our sample have taken advantage of specific policies related to parenting students. So the last page was about resources on campuses. This is about policies like Title IX accommodations. But I think it's a really important bright spot to highlight at the top here that we see that over half of our respondents have taken advantage of priority registration, so the ability to sign up for classes earlier than the general student population, which is a really recent legislative win. that we're excited about in California. And I think points to the fact that there was a very real and pressing need for that kind of accommodation and flexibility. It seems as though students are increasingly aware of it and they're taking advantage of it. It does feel as though, given that this is a 56% uptake rate and not 100%, that there's, again, an opportunity to make sure that every single student parent on every single campus knows that they can register for classes early, so that they're able to go ahead and do that. All right, so we've talked about the fact that student parents made it clear that they would like more information and clearer information about the resources available to them. We wanted to know where they are getting the information that they have at present. And we see a spread, as you imagine in our kind of digital world, most folks are getting their information from the web. So 45%, nearly half, responded that they get their information from CSU materials or websites. Almost 40% said that they get their information from CSU administration, staff, or faculty. So they're going to kind of folks with, an official role on campus. A little less than a third cited that they're talking to other students. So their peers are a resource that help them understand what's available to them. And 22% said that they go to student parent groups on campus. So this, I think, just suggests the diverse set of avenues that leaders and staff can utilize to make sure that information is getting out to parent students, with websites being one of the most powerful ones. This, again, is pretty encouraging because the state has moved to make sure that it's mandatory for every single campus to post information on their websites about Title IX accommodations and the kind of rights and resources of parenting students. So, the more information that can just explicitly and clearly be posted on websites, the better, is what this implies to us. Okay, so given what we just went through around the need for more clear and explicit information and where students are getting their information, we also just asked them explicitly, what supports or actions could your university take to support you to achieve your goals and attain your degree? And no surprise, the most frequent response we got in those open-ended responses was that they would like more awareness and transparency of services. That was tied with childcare and family services. So very, tangible and kind of present need for what is a very expensive kind of service to make sure that they have someone to look after their kids. And so 2 quick quotes on this awareness and transparency of services piece. A San Luis Obispo student mentioned that referring me to seek the Office for Students with Dependents. There were so many tools I could have used that would have made my first years at Cal Poly so much easier that I'm just learning about. So making sure very early in a student's experience that they're oriented towards the resources available would be really beneficial. A student from Bakersfield said that reaching out directly with targeted emails once they're aware I'm a parent with specific resources that might help. Notify my advisor, coordinator that I'm a parent and might benefit from alternative schedules or modalities. So neither of these seem incredibly burdensome or difficult to do, but students report that they would dramatically increase their kind of sense of belonging and improve their experience on campus. Similarly, when we asked folks what advice they would give their campus to include a sense of belonging, we heard that better communication and outreach, as well as campus facilities and events for parents, were 2 of the most important things that folks said that they would appreciate. So again, a list of resources and information available to all student parents, from daycare, family rooms exclusively for student parents, and other necessary resources, and this notion of orientation coming up again. All right, so as you guys can see, that theme of communication and transparency was a huge one. The second one was folks asking for greater flexibility and support to succeed in their coursework. Roughly 4 in 10 of our respondents reported that inflexible policies like limited absences, regardless of the reason, And mandated in-person instruction proved to be barriers to them feeling as though they could, complete assignments and succeed in their classes. That extends time to degree. It can be very discouraging, and it was consistently named as a challenge that they would appreciate support navigating. Let's see. Next slide. A similar proportion, so roughly 4 in 10, experienced situations where they did not receive the necessary accommodations to be able to kind of meet those rigorous expectations about in-person attendance, for example. So 37% have experienced others' assumptions that children are not allowed in classrooms. 35% have experienced confusion or uncertainty among faculty and staff around family-friendly policies in general. So it's really important. I want to hone in on this left-hand stat. This notion that people are assuming that children are not allowed on campuses or in classrooms. Part of this issue seems to us from the qualitative responses that we got from folks to be that there isn't consistency or explicit clarity about whether students are actually allowed on campus. So, both staff and students end up in a position where they're making assumptions about where kids can and cannot be. So we think it'd be really interesting and an important next step to actually understand every single campus's policy about when and how kids are allowed on campus. 35% have experienced this notion of confusion. And so again, this is just really making sure that not only do student parents have the information they need to fully understand and navigate the policies of the institution, but that staff and faculty have that as well, so that there's not kind of, confusion or disagreement about what's allowed and what's not allowed. So as we mentioned, the whole point of this research was to make sure that we are not making assumptions or kind of using anecdotes as examples, but uplifting the actual voices and experiences of student parents. So we have some really impactful quotes here. This one is from a student at Dominguez Hills, and they said, "I have felt a sense of uncertainty and confusion around family-friendly policies on campus, particularly with the assumption that children are not allowed in classrooms. This ambiguity has impacted my sense of belonging, as it feels like there may be a lack of support for students who are also parents. Additionally, policies that mandate in-person instruction and limit absences can add stress, especially for those with family obligations." So again, that notion that, the lack of clarity is really what's confusing and kind of causing stress, which seems like a decently easy problem to solve. If the information can just be clearly and consistently communicated on something like a website or an orientation. Another quote from a student at Bakersfield: "At the beginning of each semester, all professors give the same standard warning that missing a certain number of classes will result in being dropped, with no mention of accommodations for emergencies or childcare needs. This rigid approach can be particularly stressful for student parents who may face unforeseen challenges. The lack of information and clarity often leads to awkward moments, as bringing a child to campus can attract looks from other students and even professors, making us feel out of place." And finally, we have a Fullerton student who says they were pushing their stroller around with their baby in it and went to the food pantry and overheard another student say, "I didn't know kids are allowed on campus. So it made me feel as if children aren't allowed, which really made me feel bad." And so, we just wanted to make sure that we're giving clear line of sight into what students are experiencing as they try to navigate the kind of commitments of both parenthood and being a student. And it seems as though a lot of kind of stress and confusion is coming from this ambiguity and lack of clarity. So we see that as a really fruitful kind of opportunity for change. Back to this notion of flexibility and support. When we asked students what supports or actions their university could take to achieve their goals, we already talked about the awareness and transparency of services, but we also had really concrete suggestions from parenting students about some of these pragmatic adjustments that can be made to kind of build the net of care that they need to get to and through. So one student from the Channel Islands mentioned that more asynchronous options for classes would be extremely beneficial. They're a computer science major, and even though most of their classes are lab and computer-based, their classes are rarely online. So this is a suggestion for a move to more hybrid modalities to be accommodating. Fresno State student said, mix up schedule offerings by type, online or in person, so I can complete my classes without being gone so much at night. I also have a job which requires occasional nights. If the program says it's 50-50 in person or online, let's keep it that way. Offer childcare options during night classes. And last but certainly not least, resonating with some of those quotes that we just mentioned or read through about, how students are feeling and kind of internalizing this notion that they're somehow other because they have a kid with them on campus, and this kind of burden of not being quite sure where they're allowed to be with their child. They asked for dedicated spaces and events on campus that make it a more family-friendly environment. So a student from Long Beach, for example, said that a study space for students with children could help. We're busy individuals who do not have 30+ minutes within our day just to look for a study spot on campus. This time could be better used with our own children, helping them with homework. So some pretty clear and tangible examples of things that respondents felt would improve their experience, strengthen their sense of belonging, and make it easier for them to get to what's both their goal and the institution's goal, which is completing their degree and graduating. All right, that was a lot of data. Hopefully it's useful to have a little bit of illumination and insight into these larger findings. But we did want to make sure that we could hear directly from a student parent. So that's why Jordan is here today. And Maya is going to take us through a few questions so that Jordan can share her experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. And Isaac. That was like such powerful and rich data, especially the qualitative data that I think really adds depth and color and nuance to help us get a better understanding of what sense of belonging looks like on CSU campuses. And to add to that depth and understanding, we have the honor of hearing from Jordan Kelly, who I know was introduced earlier, but wanted to publicly recognize her again, as well as uplift the fact that she is joining us in the midst of finals. So appreciate your time, and thank you again for being willing to share.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm also really excited to have gone over all of that data because I remember taking that survey, and it's great to see and to hear from other parenting students all over the state and see what their pain points are, but also see where the CSU is getting it right.
Absolutely. Yes, and so to transition us to our first question, which I'll put in the chat for folks too, can you paint a picture of what it means for you to feel a sense of belonging at San Francisco State? What does that look or feel like?
Absolutely. So a sense of belonging to me means that I'm allowed to show up every day as my authentic self and embrace my role and my identity as a parent, and those experiences without feeling othered or judged, like I had made a moral failing in having my daughter. It also means acknowledging that student parents exist and that our participation on campus is welcome and valid. It means that I can step out of class to take a call for my daughter's preschool without feeling embarrassed, or take a sick day when she's running a fever and not worry that I'll be penalized. And it means that when the babysitter cancels, I can bring her to class with me and not feel like I'm encroaching on space where I don't belong or annoying my peers and professors. And
Yes,
that's definitely happened multiple times this semester.
yes, and this was 2 years ago now, but as a former student parent, like, I mean, as you're sharing, I'm like, yes, 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 that's exactly, I had a very similar experience, I think, in terms of, 'cause I think that there are two things that you get at, like, or that need to change. There's like that policy policy change, but also like a cultural shift, right? But like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And so it's like I think we need to tackle both of those to be able to fully and comprehensively foster a sense of belonging for our student parents. Um, what are some specific examples or ways that your peers, campus staff, faculty, or leadership have made you feel like you belong at San Francisco?
This past semester has made me really proud to be a student at San Francisco State University. Like you were saying, Maya, the culture really matters as much as the policies. And in this past semester, I've really felt a very welcoming culture personally at San Francisco State. And I'm really excited to highlight the ways that that's manifested. I have a list of bullet points for this. So first off, our Director of Health Promotion and Wellness on campus has been sending out a biannual newsletter focusing on student parent resources available to our students on campus that have self-identified as students for early registration purposes. So she has an email list that she sends all of these resources out to. That's right, Carolyn says, go Karen. It's Karen Boyce, in case anybody is familiar. So she's been sending that out biannually, and that has been amazing. Leadership on campus has been extremely receptive to creating a sense of belonging for parenting students, and that includes student leaders across campus in student-led programs and in student government, deans, staff members, and our university president, President Mahoney. Our on-campus early childhood education center is incredible. It's top tier, and it does give priority registration to student parents. I know my daughter is getting a top tier education in a safe and fulfilling environment while I'm in class, and that means the world to me, so I can focus and not have to worry about her and just focus on myself. It's also a very affordable option. They accept various sources of financial aid, and their tuition is on a sliding tuition scale. So in San Francisco, that's massive.
Mm-hmm.
They also have an active parent group, which includes parenting students. The Student Parent Club on campus is in its second year and has since expanded membership and new leadership. And they have successfully coordinated with the library to build out a family-friendly study space this semester. And I would like to shout out Marivan Rendon, who's on this call, for being a catalyst and a facilitator for that project. And on the micro level, things that have impacted me personally in my day-to-day that have made me feel really good is I've had numerous faculty and staff explicitly welcome my daughter into the classroom or into spaces. I've brought my daughter to student government committees. I've brought her to a meeting with the university president, President Mahoney, where she was acknowledged and welcomed and got to sit in on these board meetings. Two of my professors were student parents themselves. And so I felt seen and had the opportunity to bond with them over their experiences. And there was a hybrid evening class that I really wanted to take this semester, but I didn't have childcare. So when I explained to the facilitators that I didn't have childcare outside of preschool hours, they enthusiastically said, bring her, and they offered to supply her with snacks and activities and supervision in the back of the classroom so that I could focus. I didn't take them up on it and ended up finding childcare, but the sentiment was there and it was real. And finally, the Director of Career Services and Professional Development had extended the same offer so that I could participate in a fellowship on campus. And I've taken him up on it as well and brought my daughter to these fellowship meetings where she was able to sit in the back and color her coloring books and eat snacks. And I never felt like I was infringing on anybody else's space. So this cultural shift that I felt personally, I hope is something that the other student parents on campus have felt as well.
Yes, yeah, thank you for sharing it. I think what stood out to me is your experience with bringing your daughter to a meeting with the president, and how just well received she was, in that space. Just hearing that's powerful, and I think we can't, or we shouldn't understate. I know our daughters are the same age, but like understate those like early childhood experiences that set the foundation for their lives. And so my daughter, frequently now we're in Los Angeles, but when we were at Cal Poly Slow, like now she tells everyone, I lived at Cal Poly Slow. And it's like no, you lived in San Luis Obispo. But for her, like she was just so immersed in that community that, it's hard for her to like recognize that. Yeah. But and a lot of it had to do with building the community that I feel like you've been able to find in different pockets on campus. Oh yeah, thanks for sharing. And also, what advice, what advice would you give to your campus or even another student parent, um, to make sure? Yeah, what advice would you give to student parents that may not feel that similar sense of belonging that you've felt more recently?
I would advise student parents to make a conscious effort to seek out community. Um, you never know who will be your ally until you ask. And oftentimes it's not the people that you expect it to be.
Mhm.
So if if you are willing to take a chance and overcome that fear of judgment or that fear of rejection, and you let it all out and let people know what you're looking for, you might be surprised at who wants to support you and who wants to see you do well. Because there are a lot of helpers and a lot of good people, especially in higher education, that want to see good things happen for people who want to work hard for themselves and for their community.
Mhm.
Case in
Yeah,
point, look at, you know,
yeah, yeah.
Mickelson and EdTrust-West. There's this massive community that wants to see student parents do well. You just have to find them.
Mhm. Yep, yep, yeah. Like you said, case in point, even I think the chat is like a micro this chat right now. And folks are so proud of you and are like just echoing, kind of shouting out like Karen Boyce and just other folks that I think have been instrumental um in the work at San Francisco State. Lastly, wanted to ask, and I've just put in the chat for folks to reference, what advice would you give your campus and the CSU as a whole to make sure parenting students are supported to thrive um, and meet their goal of degree attainment?
I would I would double and triple down on the concept of culture,
Mhm.
because building and nurturing that culture of belonging for student parents is a choice. We have all of these policies, which are needed and necessary, as you touched on. But at the end of the day, it is that explicit welcome from the powers that be saying, we want you here, you belong here, you're a part of our story, that makes all of the difference. So leaning into that, because that's, in my opinion, the easier piece, really. It's just a
Mhm.
mindset shift. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And like you said earlier, I think with the folks leading the way, like 20MM, like the CSU or the chancellor's office, like there's a there's momentum, right? And it started like that cultural shift, and hopefully it'll continue. But it started. But yep, I absolutely hear you. Wanted to make space and see if there's anything else you wanted to add on or share.
Not not much. I just agree that I think that the momentum, I've really felt the momentum in this semester, uh, compared to the past year before it. It felt like it was really hard to get movement and really hard to get momentum. And all of a sudden, it feels like it's all coming to fruition and coming together. So it
And,
feels good to be here now and to bear witness.
and are you seeing, I guess, momentum at the institutional level to like, in addition at the institutional level as well, or thinking about at the state level?
Both. I'm
Okay.
seeing momentum at both. I'm seeing momentum at the state level with the bills that are getting passed.
Mhm.
Of course, my anecdotal experience is mostly at the institutional level, but it it just feels like there is a very positive shift happening. So it's a good time.
Mhm. It is a good time.
Yeah.
And appreciate you, Jordan. Thank you for sharing your insight and your experience with us. Always wonderful.
Thank you, Maya. And thank you everyone for inviting me to speak. It's an honor and a privilege.
Awesome hearing from Jordan. Lovely as always. Um, but wanted to again hear from a student, like a current student parent, to further ground us in the why this is important, and to also hear and to see that there are institutions doing really good work, and there's like proof of concepts out there that show us that things can be replicated. um, but before we proceed to the next slide, I wanted to ground us in some really powerful quotes from our student parent respondents. Um, these quotes, along with others, have informed our recommendations that will follow on or that we'll explore on the following slides. But one student parent at Sacramento State said, and I quote, "I asked permission ahead of time whether I can take my son with me to school. Some faculty said okay, some faculty said no. I just had mixed answers." And then a student parent at Cal State LA shared, "I never know about available resources. The syllabus does not outline family-friendly procedures or what resources are available in case childcare is needed." So these two quotes highlight some of the challenges and barriers that student parents face, particularly around uncertainty, around kids on campus policies, as well as a lack of clear information about available resources, say beyond the Campus Children's Center. So as noted on the previous slide, we use evidence to drive our action and our policy recommendations. And so in other words, we believe that those closest to the issues intuitively know the solutions. And so it's always an honor to be able to construct and create recommendations based on student voice, and student experience. And so the data that we gather from the 200 student parent respondents, and from our survey, have informed these recommendations that you see on the slide. And so the recommendations, as you can see, they're tailored to specific stakeholders, including the CSU Chancellor's Office, CSU campuses, as well as state legislators. And we believe that each of these groups play an important and central role in advancing student parent success, student parent well-being, as well as strengthening a sense of belonging for student parents. Before I dive into the recommendations, do just want to give a really brief shout out to the CSU Chancellor's Office for the launch of their Pregnant and Parenting Student Initiative, which was in partnership with 20MM or the Michelson Foundation. I'll drop an article in the chat about this incredible initiative in a moment, but they are the initiative will be central in strengthening sense of belonging in many things, but also in strengthening sense of belonging across the system. And so, to get into our recommendations, we recommend that the CSU Chancellor's Office issues clear system-wide guidance on kids on campus policies. Students reported confusion about whether children are legally allowed on campus or in classrooms, and they tend to get mixed responses from staff and faculty, similar to the quote that was on the previous slide. And this ambiguity varies from campus to campus, which not only creates that uncertainty for our student parents, but also, there's this like inconsistent or like ad hoc enforcement that happens from faculty and staff. with a really interesting dynamic, because some staff and faculty strictly adhere to like no kids on campus policies or no kids in classroom policies. And so we're wanting, again, I think it'd be beneficial to have some guidance, and for there to be a distinction also about supervised minors versus unsupervised minors, because in some of the responses, it seems like um, uh, some staff and faculty are leaning on like or are treating kind of the unsupervised minor policy as the same as the same to like a student parent and their child, which is like in their presence and accounted for. And so, yeah, that's our recommendation to the chancellor's office: issue clear system-wide guidance on minors on campus policies to eliminate the ambiguity and varying interpretations by students, staff, and faculty within and across campuses. Our second recommendation is to our to CSU campuses. We recommend that CSU campuses create family-friendly syllabus statement templates. And I know that these exist out there, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo being an example. But we recommend that professors use or adapt clear expectations for attendance, participation, support available for student parents. These templates can include language on understanding student parents' unexpected needs, as well as provide flexibility around childcare or family-related emergencies. And so, I see this one as a low touch, but really high impact practice. As student parents will feel seen at the beginning of their courses, they'll feel empowered, be like empowered and like more likely to engage academically and show up full self. And lastly, but certainly not least, we recommend that policymakers prioritize funding for the development and expansion of family-friendly spaces on campus. And so these can include childcare centers, family resource centers, the funding of extended learning opportunities, changing tables, as well as 24-hour family-friendly study rooms. And so, again, each of these stakeholders, each of these folks are central in fostering and creating and maintaining a sense of belonging for student parents. I will now pass it back to Eve to lead us on our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you to the team for such a rich discussion. I want to continue it as I see that some of you have added questions in the Q&A. If you have not done so, feel free to take some time right now to do so. But we have one question from Daniel. He says, considering that some literature indicates an ideological incompatibility between student identity and parent identity, and there are many student parents describe their experience as invisible, do you find challenges in using sense of belonging, the term sense of belonging?
That's such a great question. Isaac, did you want to jump in and I can follow you up?
Yeah. So I thought this was a fantastic question, and I think it's something that was highlighted in our survey and how the results came in, that when we activate the identity of parenting student, when prompting that, when soliciting responses, the response we got changed. So it really highlighted that students, even parenting students themselves, don't always consider their identity at the forefront when considering their place in institution. I think that there's more that we can study there to determine what kind of leads to that and what causes that. But I also think it demonstrates kind of even more why it's important that we are doing the work to better understand the experiences of parenting students and their sense of belonging. Because there is a chance that parenting students aren't initially thinking of this identity when being asked about their sense of belonging as a student, because they don't feel it's compatible with the campus environment, or they don't feel it's compatible with their identity as a student. And we don't want that to be the case. And so I think I'm hoping that as we normalize the culture, as we make a more inclusive environment that's supportive of parenting students, and implement a number of these recommendations that Maya gave, that we will start to be able to uncover even deeper, the ways in which parenting students show up on campus, because they'll feel that that identity is more connected to their student identity.
I could not agree more. This question really resonated, this notion that student parents often feel invisible. And we're hoping that some of this qualitative work and some of the work of the Chancellor's Office is going to help to change that dynamic. And for me, the asset framed question really kind of helps to speak to this notion that the two identities don't have to contradict one another. And when we help to kind of like frame the question for student parents in a strengths or asset based way, they really quickly articulate, the tangible things that they are able to do differently and better because their minds have to work differently. They have to be able to multitask. They have different priorities and really clear understanding of the urgency and value of the work that they're doing because of their status as parents. So I think that mindset shift, like Jordan was talking about, of helping to marry those two identities together much more clearly and in an asset framed way can help to, make the invisible visible.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have another question from Monique that says, what is your take on generalizing qualitative research? I have worked with many student parents and am one myself, but there is much variation between experiences. My concern is homogenizing the group and creating programs on campus that miss serving all parenting students. What about individual approaches? I like the idea of advising and mentorship programs that can possibly mitigate this.
This is also a fantastic question. And I see an answer in a yes and approach, right? If our goal overall is to create an environment in which students are holistically supportive, and especially parenting students are holistically supported, that means that there's going to be various different touch points, right? One of the things we talked about as a team pretty early on, as we're developing these policy recommendations, is recognizing that it isn't always as simple to have a single place in which a parenting student can get all the information they need. That is helpful. It's also helpful that that information is widely known amongst a campus, right? It doesn't do as much good to a parenting student if only one person on campus knows that they can have their student, they can have their child on campus, as much as it would do if, many people on campus knew, if it was a well understood thing by faculty members and staff members, right? And so I see this as being an opportunity to take a yes and approach. We're going to have to do a number of things to make sure that parenting students are supported in the way they need. That means that certain programs designed for parenting students can be really helpful. It also means that, the existence of that program doesn't negate the need for peer mentorship groups. It also needs, the groups of parenting students working together to help provide support to each other as well, right? If we're going to provide wraparound services, I think there's a space for both an individualized and community approach, as well as a larger institutional approach.
Yeah, again, just +1, Isaac. I think I couldn't have said it better. And I think that part of why we always at EdTrust-West try to complement quantitative data with qualitative research is to add that nuance. I wish we had, 2 more hours today to dig into this data with you all, because I think, at each individual campus, there's a different story going on. Within each individual campus, students are having different experiences. And I think as Monique mentioned, it is so important not to homogenize and generalize any student population, especially when we're talking about an equity focus. And I think the qualitative data and the ways that we can cut it across different dimensions, like even gender and race, can allow us to drill down on things that can lead to much more tailored solutions that are more human and student-centered than we would be able to otherwise. So that's part of why I'm especially excited about this study. And we're really thinking about, how we can get information out such that those nuances are not lost.
I think I may have seen a hand that was raised but disappeared. So feel free to write a question in the Q&A. Someone asked, do you have a place where you can find your publication of this study so we can dig deeper?
That is a great question. So I believe that the Michelson 20mm Foundation is going to post these slides online so you can dig into the information that we shared today. We are in the process of working up the findings into a memo and a more full slide deck that will go live on our website, and we'll follow up with attendees from today's webinar to make sure that you guys have that more holistic set of information as well. That should be sometime within the next few months.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I do know that some of these questions were answered, but I just want to amplify some of those answers for our folks joining us today. Someone had asked, how does our campus get involved in these studies? And Maya went ahead and put her contact information, and this information will also be shared out to you folks via email along with the recording of this webinar. But I did want to make sure that you all were aware that they are building a staff and faculty, student, parent champion roster across CSU campuses. So feel free to connect with Maya on that. Looking now, Jeanette asked, as a parent, how can I advocate and litigate for these family-friendly spaces, family resource centers, high chairs, changing tables, and possibly providing incentives like wraparound services for parents? And how can we make this happen? What about parenting for parents who suffer with mental health? So if there's, I see that Jordan was typing a little bit, if you want to go ahead and answer that live.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer that. So there are a lot of answers to that question, but the first one is to be ready for a marathon and not a sprint. It's not something that happens quickly. And it involves finding other student parents, building community, reaching out to the people on campus who are already doing similar work or already in that space. For example, in basic needs, we had a champion in basic needs. A group of student parents and I founded a club. We connected with the child care center on campus and built out from there. And it's just a continuation of always advocating and always seeing who you can talk to and who you can work with and who's willing to help. And it takes a lot, but it is worth it. So it's just a matter of finding your people and finding your allies, constantly bringing it up, constantly bringing up the conversation, constantly asking who is already doing this work and who wants to help. So that's my answer.
I'll also jump in, +1 to what Jordan said. Yes, find your community. And I know, like as a like when I was a transfer student, and then a graduate student parent, but I was commuting, right? So I was disconnected from the institution, and it was like finding community. People like suggested that, and I'm like, well, what does that look like? Like that's not intuitive for someone that's like a super commuter, right? That's not intuitive for someone that quite literally spends an hour each way. But it is true. So like get, if there's a WhatsApp, you can maybe start a WhatsApp, and begin to organize that way. I would also suggest leveraging your and Dr. Chuk, everything I'm saying, shout out to Dr. Chuk, because she was my mentor and like taught me everything. But leverage like your media, like your student newspaper. If there's an issue or if there's a gap, somewhere. So like you said, if there aren't high chairs in your, food, I don't know, your cafeteria or food area, like highlight that gap and see if your student newspaper will be willing to write up something on that. There are ways that you can leverage like already existing infrastructure, again, like media, your student media. You can leverage like WhatsApp, and again, that would for folks that don't have a lot of time, that's just like, hey, I can plug in here, but this is, you can stay up to date. The last thing that I'll say is what I found really effective was like going from like the top down, and I know that I feel as students we have that you have that leeway. So trying to get on your president's calendar and like write like a memo um, of all the issues or all the barriers to student parent success. And then also in that same memo, have like solutions, right? Or corresponding solutions. So it's like, hey, these are these are the barriers, or these are the issues, and this is how you as an institution can rectify or alleviate that. But start at the top down. I find that to be a lot more effective in getting things moving sometimes.
I can jump in. I think about my experience as an organizer as a student, and one of the things I think about is really leveraging the power of like collective and really leveraging the power of a group, right? You are never the only parenting student on a campus. Um, you are also never the only parenting student who acknowledges that that's a vital part of their identity. And so I think about, to Maya's point and to Jordan's point, being persistent is so powerful. There is no need to do this alone, right? So I can think of times for various issues as an organizer where we would do email campaigns. It would be, because part of this is understanding that this is a bigger issue than just one person saying, "Hey, this is something that we need. These are accommodations that are needed." Um, and so I think leveraging your student government on your campus can be really helpful to reach out, leveraging other parenting students, even folks who aren't parenting students that you are friends with on campus that recognize that this is a need is also there, right? There's the role for allyship in this work too. Um, but there is no need to kind of do this in isolation. This work is done in community.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. I believe we just have one question for Jordan regarding if you can please elaborate on the champion for basic needs, as they're interested in knowing more of what this looks like.
Absolutely. So on my campus, the basic needs uh, department, if you will, is covered under health promotion and wellness, and that's its own department. And so within that department, there are people who are trained specifically on what supports are available to students, not exclusively parenting students, but all students from different economic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, um, all intersecting identities. And those are the people that will have background on resources that are already available, whether it be CalFresh, food cards, housing, and those people may already be working with other parenting students because these identities often intersect already. So that's a great place to start if you're looking for someone who not only wants to see you do well, but also knows what resources may already be available, and they're already in the mindset of helping students who may need access to extra resources. I hope that answers your question.
I'm really grateful for the discussion that we had today. Thank you to you all for such an incredible conversation as we learn what next steps look like. So please stay tuned to see the official report on these findings, which will be released by EdTrust-West later. In the meantime, you are welcome to access these findings through this recorded discussion, which will be posted on our YouTube channel, the Michelson 20MM Foundation, and will be emailed to you all by tomorrow. Friends, we hope that you walk away with today's event feeling inspired, informed, and better equipped to support pregnant and parenting students on your campus. The State of Pregnant and Parenting Students in California was presented by the Michelson 20MM Foundation as part of our mission to advance equity for all students and families. We want to once again thank our partners, Ascend at the Aspen Institute, Blue Shields of California Foundation, the California Community Foundation, California Competes, EdTrust-West, and the Tipping Point community for making this webinar happen today. If you're interested in learning more about our work with pregnant and parenting students, please visit our website. We will drop a link to that in the chat. Additionally, if you or your organization want to be part of our work on supporting pregnant and parenting students, please feel free to reach out to me. I will go ahead and drop my email in the chat as well. And you can also stay engaged by signing up for our newsletter at 20mm20mm.org to receive news updates about our pregnant and parenting student project, as well as other events and programming. Thank you again for joining us and for centering the needs of pregnant and parenting students. We hope you all have a great holiday season.